All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Ann Muska. I am the program manager for the Master of Arts in Educational Transformation at Georgetown. Um, I will be guiding you through our time tonight, along with my colleagues, Professor Wesley Nero and Professor Dung, who will introduce themselves later. So what we're going to cover this evening, who we are as a program, our program commitments, a little bit of our history, an overview of our program and our different concentrations, an overview of the admissions process to enter our program, and then any questions that you all have. So start off, our team. See me on there, Ann Muska, I'm the program manager. Professor Wesley Nero is our program director. She is on this call. You'll be hearing from her later. And Professor Dung is one of our professors, also on this call, and you'll be hearing from her later as well. So who are we? Who is this program? We were launched in 2017, actually, as part of Georgetown's Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. And we are the first program at Georgetown that offers a U.S. teaching licensure. So we offer a teaching license for DC. We are a program designed for graduate students interested in ensuring that all children in the U.S. K-12 school system have the opportunities and resources needed to thrive. We're committed to ensuring that our students, as in our graduate students, have the knowledge, skills, foresight, competence, and understanding to transform education in the US, whether that's in the classroom, through policy and advocacy work, through education research. And our program model integrates experiential learning with rigorous coursework through applied research and residency-based experiences. And you'll hear about residency and research experiences a little bit later. I'm now going to turn it over to Professor Wesley Nero to talk a little bit about our program commitments.
Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Wesley Nero, and as Ann explained, I'm the director of our graduate program in educational transformation. I'm so excited to have you here with us today. We know there are many graduate programs and master's programs across the nation, and I can imagine you're wondering why you should choose the Georgetown Master's Program in Educational Transformation. We believe we have 4 foundational commitments that make our program distinctive. Our program is a graduate program at Georgetown that extends our Jesuit principles to the study of education and the preparation of the next generation of education leaders. We believe in systemic thinking. That means that all of our students are equipped to take an interdisciplinary approach to the study of education and examine how systems, historical and with our current context, interweave and intersect, and how we can work those systems to disrupt inequitable educational outcomes. When our approach when working with students and with partners, we take an asset-based, culturally relevant, and culturally sustaining approach. We do that with our students, and we equip our students to do that in their residencies and later in their career. This means that we develop culturally and linguistically sustaining pedagogical practices with learners, collaborations with families and communities, and approaches to advocacy and research. In our program, we prioritize equity, justice, and anti-racism. We're clear about our North Star, and we aim to move everyone toward more equitable outcomes by fixing our clear eye on the roots of oppression in U.S. society and public schools. And finally, you'll learn more tonight how each concentration embraces experiential learning. We do this through our students building theory and research and practice bridges across those content areas. We engage in complexity of applied work, and we build connections with professional colleagues to help jumpstart your career and the impact you'll have in educational equity in the United States. I will hand it back over to Ann.
Professor Wesley Nero. So now we're going to go over the structure of our program and the different concentration opportunities within the program. So our program has 3 concentrations available. Everyone who applies to the program chooses the concentration they apply to. We have advocacy and policy, learning and teaching, which is our program that leads to an ESL licensure in DC. You will also see this concentration referred to as the Georgetown University Teacher Residency Program. And new for this year, we have our 3rd concentration, inquiry and applied research. Our program is 30 credit hours or 10 courses over 12 months. Our program begins in July and finishes in June to kind of mimic the K through 12 school year. So we're a 1-year intensive full-time program. We do have a 2-year part-time option. If that is something that is interesting to you, please reach out and let me know. For our advocacy and policy and learning and teaching concentrations, our students work at their residency experience during the day, and then in the evening are in full-time coursework. And for students in our inquiry and applied research concentration, you are in that coursework at night with the other concentrations, but then you're working on your research project experience outside of course time. That might be during the day, it might be on weekends, around your full-time job, whatever. Something that's unique about our program that you'll hear us talk a lot about is not only are we cohort-based, so we're a small program that really focuses on each individual student and supporting that student's journey through our program. And so you all get to know us really well and you get to know each other really well. But we also employ experiential learning. So not only are you learning theoretical coursework, you are getting hands-on experience in your desired concentration. So whether that's classroom teaching through learning and teaching, that's policy work, community activism and advocacy work, through advocacy and policy, or education research work through our inquiry and applied research concentration. Our total tuition is about $65,000, but we do have significant scholarships available, and I'll talk about those a little bit later. So as I mentioned, there are some really interesting and unique things about our program. So one is that experiential learning I mentioned. While you are learning a lot of fascinating theory in our program, you're also learning not only in your coursework, but in your experiential learning, how to apply that research, right? For students in the learning and teaching concentration, that looks like learning how to become a teacher. Right? For advocacy and policy students, it's how to really move in the world of education, policy, and advocacy work. For inquiry and applied research students, it's that research experience to really make education better for K through 12 students. We have a professional development speaker series a few times a semester, where outside of class time, we bring in speakers, whether they're education researchers or community members, people working in K through 12 education advocacy work, classroom teachers, where we bring them in to do either panel discussions, workshops, or talks, so that we can expand your network of education contacts, but also expose you to other issues in education that we might not be covering necessarily in our coursework. So for example, we've had a speaker series panel on how gentrification affects education in DC as a school district. We had an academic come to talk to us about a Supreme Court case that affects language access laws in K-12 education. Those are just two of examples of the many speaker series we've done. And then, as I mentioned, because we are a cohort-based program, our students develop close relationships not only with fellow students, but also with our professors. So we are with you every step of the way through this program. All of your faculty know how you're doing in class, how things are going in your residency experience, how we can support you through the program so that you're succeeding from day one. I'm now going to turn it over to Professor Doug to talk about our advocacy and policy concentration.
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Mingzhu Deng. I am an assistant teaching professor in the program. I teach both the advocacy and policy concentration and the learning and teaching concentration. So, okay, let's talk about advocacy and policy courses. So in summer 1, you have 2 courses, and then in summer 2, you also have 2 courses. And then you can look at the ones that's highlighted, that's in bold: culturally relevant education and social justice, and advocating for learners and learning. Those 2 are cross-concentration courses, which means you're going to take those courses with the A&T folks and our new concentration folks. And then in summer 1, you will start taking theory and also learning some practices about analyzing big data. So you have critical empirics, and then in the fall semester, you have quantitative analysis in education. Also in the fall semester, you have policy analysis in education, which will introduce all the broad historical and current important theories of analyzing policy. Right. And then in the spring semester, you have a course called Organizational Change in Education, which focuses on the different theories for making changes in schools, in the schooling system, and also advocacy strategies of how to, that may be useful for advocating for changes in schools and beyond. Also in the fall and spring semester, you have a policy residency course. So in the fall, you have policy residency 1, and in the spring, you have policy residency 2. We tend to look at those two courses as one, but a year-long policy residency course. So in this course, you have the opportunity to develop a policy project based on your own interest, and it is a very well scaffolded project. And also we have created space in those courses for you to debrief, to talk about your residency experiences with your peers, with your professor. We provide feedback and advice. And also this is the policy residency is where we also will engage with some really practical skills that may be useful at your residency or useful in general for working in the policy field. For example, in this semester in policy residency 1, we had a workshop on digital visualization, data visualization, and then we also have like alumni panels, which will have like career center folks come in talking about how to make the best use of your residency, how to build your resume, and how to start your job search process, etc., etc. And then in summer 2, we have a learning design assessment policy course for you as well.
Thanks, Professor Dung. Professor Dung will now also tell us about our learning and teaching concentration.
Okay, so yeah. So for learning and teaching concentration, our ESL pre-source teachers, they, again, summer 1 and summer 2, you have 2 courses, and culturally relevant education and social justice in summer 1, and advocating for learners and learning in summer 2, they are cross-concentration courses. And then in summer 1, you have a theoretical foundation course for educational linguistics. So then in the fall semester, you have second language acquisition, instruction, and assessment, which is where we start, going from theory to practice. So what does those educational linguistics theory, what does those second language acquisition theory means in the classroom? What does classroom assessment and instructional practices look like based on those theories and research? And also in the fall semester, you have creating productive classroom communities. So we talk about what are some of the most effective way to create a effective and productive classroom community to build positive relationships with your students and the families. We talk about also what are some of the issues with school discipline historically, and how we could create a classroom and even like a school discipline policy that is equitable for all of our students. And then in the spring semester, you have multilingual learners in schools, in which we talk about culture and policy and other issues of how culture impact learning. And also similarly, we have teacher residency 1 and teacher residency 2 in the fall and spring semester. So those are also spaces in which we will help you build your resume, build your teaching practices, and then have space for you to discuss, to problem solve with your peers and your professors. And then in summer 2, you have critical perspectives of child and adolescent development. That is the course that focuses mostly on children and youth psychology, et cetera, et cetera.
Thanks, Professor Tom. Professor Wesley Nero, I am now going to turn it over to you for our inquiry and applied research concentration.
Thanks, Anne. One of the things you might notice is that we have this underlying theory of change. We believe that if we can prepare education leaders who work inside of classrooms as teachers, who work in the community with nonprofit organization and advocacy organization in the policy space, and those who have the research skills and they're all aimed toward equity, we can help be a positive change in public schools. So that last piece, we have students who graduate from our program who have research skills, and we're all aiming that toward the educational equity movement we're trying to build in the United States. Is this new concentration. So imagine that you have a current position, maybe in an education space, in a school, in a district, or nonprofit organization, and you believe that developing your applied research skills will help you move along in your career trajectory. This would be the concentration for you. Or if you anticipate going further on in your graduate studies for doctoral studies and you want to first develop your research skill, this also would be the concentration for you. So basically in this concentration, it mirrors as far as calendar, the other two concentrations. You'll notice the two shared courses across concentrations in summer 1 and summer 2, where everyone who is preparing to be a teacher, who's preparing to work in policy and advocacy, and who's aiming to develop their research skills will take those courses together. And then the second course in the summer and the second course in summer 1 and summer 2 will be specific to our concentrations. So if you look at the inquiry and applied research concentrations, you will see that across those semesters, you build a foundational understanding of what are the social foundations of U.S. K through 12 public schooling. And in that course, you'll understand the history and the context of public schools in the United States, so you can understand from which you can build toward equity. You'll have your first course in applied research education to understand what applied research is, how you interpret it, how you read it. You'll also have a course that you take alongside of advocacy and policy students and data analysis. That'll build off the quantitative course you take in summer 1 in critical empirics. In spring 2, you start to design and implement your own applied research project in the Implementation Studio Lab. And you continue learning about applied research strategies, methods, ways of data analysis, and designing research studies in applied research education too. And then you choose between either taking organizational change in education, if you're more interested toward how organizations and policies change, or multilinguals in schools, if you're more interested about how diversity works, particularly linguistic diversity in schools. In that final summer, you have your last two courses, Learning Design and Assessment Policy and Advocating for Learners and Learning. We believe that this particular new concentration, we're very excited about it. And one of the things that's distinctive is that instead of having a residency, many of the people in this concentration may be working jobs already, and they will be doing applied research as part of their coursework and be able to maybe employ that in their current jobs. When we're talking about the jobs, I'm going to turn it back over to Anne, and Anne will talk about the career paths of our alumni. I should have done a smoother transition, Anne.
Thank you, Professor Wesley Nero. I was stumbling to find my unmute button. So I'm loving the questions you all are putting in the chat because they're a little bit more overarching rather than concentration specific. I'm actually going to address them in our Q&A at the end. They're all great questions. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about our alumni career paths. So our students do all kinds of amazing things after this program. I've kind of put different topic areas here or different types of positions that our students will do, but really the sky's the limit in the field of education. So we have students who go on to work at not-for-profits or community organizations, including like research organizations, think tanks, at local advocacy organizations, higher level than local advocacy organizations. We have students who go into government or public service, whether that's working with local DC offices like the Office of the State Superintendent for Education in DC or the Mayor's Office doing education issues. We have students who actually go to work in local or state government in other states as well. And then we have some students who are interested more in the federal level and go into that. So working with Congress or the Senate on education issues or federal education policy. Some of our students are in more like the direct field of education. So a lot of our students are classroom teachers who now have this fantastic lens of like this critical equity oriented lens on how to approach classroom teaching. Sometimes, especially for our learning and teaching concentration, since you are getting your teaching license, that's the path for you is working in DC with culturally and linguistically diverse learners. We have students who go on who go on to more K through 12 support. So working as like maybe a culture dean in a school or a vice principal or something, right? So while we don't have the licensure that's for like educational leadership, our students do have the background then to be working more with students thinking about like DEI in the education system, for example. And then we have students who actually work in colleges and universities, so higher education, on education issues for K through 12. So what that might be something like college equity and access for students coming from high school to college, or college groups that work with K through 12 schools, like after school programs. And then we have students who actually go on to more school. We have students who have gone on to either EDD programs, education doctorates, or PhD programs, doing educational research. We've had students go to law school because they are interested in education-related law, and we've really given them that foundation for how to advocate for educational change in the K through 12 system in the US. And then we have students who actually go on to additional graduate school because they want to do, a master's in data analysis to do just a little bit more work in that, or to get their license to become a vice principal, right? So the sky's really the limit with this program of the different kinds of educational career paths you can go through. I'm now going to talk a little bit about the admissions process. So our application checklist. Number one thing you will need is the completed application form. Number two is there is an application fee. Now, if you apply before our January 15th application deadline, that application fee is waived. We have 3 application deadlines, which I believe are mentioned on the next slide, but I'll mention them now. December 15th is our priority scholarship consideration deadline. January 15th is our fee waiver deadline, and then April 1st is our final deadline. And remember, this is to start the program in July. So if you apply before that January 15th date, the application fee is waived. We require about 500-word statement of purpose. So for learning and teaching students, that would look like your teaching philosophy and why you want to work with ESL students, culturally and linguistically diverse students. For advocacy and policy, talking about, the experiences you've had in education and how you want to do that kind of advocacy and policy work moving forward. For inquiry and applied research, it would be your research topic that you're interested in pursuing. We also have a writing exercise. So you might see in other programs you're applying to that there's, you need to upload a writing sample. So like maybe a paper you wrote in undergrad. We've actually shifted away from a writing sample and instead provide you with a prompt that we would like you to write about. It's a report from the Aspen Institute on education in the US. We want about a 500-word response, and you can see more details about that on our website. But the reason we moved to this is that it gives us a better idea of your writing where you are right now, rather than maybe a few years ago when you were an undergrad, and maybe you didn't necessarily write an education-related paper in undergrad. So this gives us a sense of where your writing, citation, research skills are right now. We need a copy of your resume. We need 3 letters of recommendation. Because we are an academic program, we ask that 2 of these letters of recommendation be from former professors of yours from undergrad, or maybe if you've done any other grad school, so that we can hear what you're like as a student. And then one of those letters should be a professional reference. So if you've worked in a school before, maybe with your principal, right? If you've been out of undergrad or other graduate school you've done for a while, let me know. We can discuss maybe doing one letter that's academic and two that are professional instead, but we do want at least one academic letter because we want to know what you're going to be like as a graduate student. We will need copies of your unofficial transcripts from your undergraduate degree and then any graduate coursework you might have done already. You do not need to submit official transcripts until after you have been admitted to the program. If your undergraduate degree is from an institution where the language of instruction was not English, then we will need proof of English proficiency. And that can be either with the TOEFL exam or the IELTS exam. And then for the learning and teaching concentration, we will need either proof that you had over a 3.0 on a 4.0 scale in your undergraduate degree, or the Praxis Core exam or the GRE exam. This is a requirement to get your teaching license in DC. For advocacy and policy and inquiry and applied research, there are no test score requirements. So, as I mentioned, our application deadlines to start in July of 2026 are December 15th, January 15th, and April 1st. If you apply for the first deadline, December 15th, that's when we are able to give out the largest scholarship packages. So that's our priority scholarship consideration deadline. As I mentioned, if you apply before January 15th, your application fee will be waived. And then our final deadline is April 1st. I recommend applying before April 1st, simply because it's a little bit of a tight turnaround between April 1st and when we start in July. We strongly recommend that if you are an international student applying to this program, so you will be attending the program on a student visa, that you apply no later than January 15th to make sure you have time to process your visa. Okay, now, funding the program. All of our applications are considered for program-funded merit aid. I mentioned that we have a priority scholarship consideration deadline. That's when we can give out our largest packages, but we do consider every application for aid. Learning and teaching applicants are also considered for additional scholarships through Project Elect, which is a grant we have through the Department of Education to train more ESL teachers for culturally and linguistically diverse learners. For the advocacy and policy and learning and teaching residency experiences, those residencies typically are paid. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about in our Q&A how you get the residencies. I know a couple of you had questions about that, but those residency experiences typically are paid. We can't guarantee that all of them are paid, but they are mostly paid. So that's going to offset your tuition as well. All right, we've made it to the Q&A. We've thrown a lot of information at you. I'm going to go through the chat and just start with the questions we've gotten already. Please feel free to add more questions to the chat or come off mute if you would prefer. So we first have a question about what partnerships and pathways are available for the advocacy and policy residency. And is it up to the individual to find their residency placement? Professor Dunn, would you like to talk about the residency placement process for advocacy and policy?
Sure. So I'll start with the first part. What kind of pathways? So okay, so I'm gonna what I'm gonna talk about is the type of positions that our students have previously and currently being placed, being doing, right? So we have students who work in nonprofit organizations here in the DMV area, and then some of these nonprofit organizations are like research-based, some are like grant writing based, for example, like writing grants for after-school programs. And then there are nonprofit organizations who are more engaged with the community organizing type of work. So we also have students who work this year less, but previously we have school students who work for the in some government organizations as well. We actually currently also have students who work in the school districts. So we have some students who work in State Board of Ed in DC. We have students who work in some of the like Arlington City Public Schools and Alexandria Public City Schools previously as well. So the school district central office near Georgetown. And then we have students who also work for Georgetown. Like we have some positions, some partnership positions where we have had students there. So those are typically like student facing, either like Georgetown undergrad facing type of positions, or like if Georgetown has a, like for example, Georgetown Center for Social Justice has some tutoring programs that they're running for DC's students. And then we have students who work in those kind of admin positions as well. So we we do encourage our students to also be actively looking for positions for ANP and for learning and teaching concentration as well. And then we have partners, organizations, school districts that we have traditionally been working with, and then they've had good experience with our students, and we also have those opportunities that we will do a facilitated matching. So we'll look at our incoming students, what type of positions they're interested in, and then our faculty will also then gauge what kind of person our partner organizations are looking for, and we do a facilitated matching process. And then you, as a student, will go through a typical interview, the resume giving and interview process.
Thanks, Professor. How frequently do the advocacy and policy and then learning and teaching cohorts collaborate during the fall and spring, if at all? So we mentioned that in the 2 summers, you have cross-concentration courses. What does it look like between the cohort or between the concentrations in the fall and the spring?
So I'll do that, and Anne, I might, if it doesn't confuse us, to jump out of order, because there's later a question about L&T, learning, teaching, residencies as well. So I'll pick up on Professor Dung's explanation of the advocacy and policy residency placement process. The facilitated matching, I think, is a key term for both concentration residency processes. So we don't place you and we don't guarantee your position. We help you find a position, and you're often encouraged to look for your own positions. At the same time, we've been in existence for multiple years now, so we have recurring residency partners who have had previous students as their residents, and they want to come back. So we'll have these relationships that we leverage on your behalf for both concentrations. So for example, for learning and teaching, these students typically take the position of teacher residents working with multilingual students. In DC, we have both public schools and public charter schools, and they may call these positions differently. So for some schools, they're actually labeled resident teachers or teaching apprentice or teacher assistants or educational aides, but these are all the residency place positions in these schools. And we have schools that have hired our residents each year. We have more schools every year who want to hire our resident, and we make sure those hiring principals and our incoming students know those positions are there, and we help give you suggestions on how to navigate the hiring process. But we do not place you in a position. You go through the process, you do your interview, we help you prepare if you'd like that kind of preparation. We have a graduate center for career development that also has resources to help you prepare as well. And the same thing happens with advocacy and policy from the multiple partnerships we have with nonprofit organizations, government organizations who've had our students in the past. And we re-engage them every spring to see if they'd like to have them in the future. And there are always students who also come in and say, I've seen this position, it's aligned with education policy, can I apply for that? And we help you prepare for that. And then when you're looking at the way the concentrations interact outside of summer and fall, we have those professional development speaker series that Anna mentioned at the top of our time together, and those are for everyone across the cohort. So we have those about monthly, 2 to 3 a semester. We also have race-like affinity groups where it's across those concentrations. And then you will notice, particularly for inquiry and applied research, there are some courses they take across concentration as well as courses specific to those concentrations. The questions are rolling in, and this is great.
Thank you. Bushra, I'm actually going to expand on your international student work question to talk about international students in general. So the question is, are international students allowed to work in these roles as part of the program? I want to talk about international students in the program in general. we are approved to have international students in our program. Your residency experience, whether that's in advocacy and policy or learning and teaching, is approved under curricular practical training as a requirement for our program. I will say that we are a US K through 12 program, so we do look for students who have experience with the US K through 12 system, interest in the US K through 12 system. And that can look like different things, right? But we are not a program that's necessarily designed to talk about education in general, like global education. So if you are interested more in global education, I'm happy to chat with you to like maybe look for some other programs since we're US focused. But we do have international students in our program, and they are allowed to work in the program under curricular practical training. I see a question on estimated time for applicants to hear back. Great question. So typically you will hear back from us after roughly 8 weeks past the deadline. So let's say you apply for the December 15th deadline. If you apply on December 1st, it's still going to be about 8 weeks after December 15th because we'll review the applications together. You'll first receive a note from us saying that we are recommending you for admission, if that is the case, and then you will receive an official letter from the graduate school. Great question. Can an applicant submit their application before all letters of recommendation are complete? Yes. So something like your letter of recommendation, you need to have requested them when you submit your application, and ideally your recommender will also submit it for the deadline, but we can give you a grace period of a few days if maybe they got it in a little bit late. But you do not necessarily need to miss our application deadline just because you are waiting for the letter to come in.
And I'll also highlight here that you cannot receive an official admission decision if the application is incomplete, but we can review everything that's submitted on time, and then we can go back and look at letters if they come in just a few days late. But we can't offer an official admission decision with any missing pieces from the application.
While we're pausing to see if anyone has any other questions, I'm actually going to flip to my last side, which is my contact info. So if you are like me in like an hour from now, you'll think of a question that you meant to ask. Please feel free to get in touch with your questions. You can either set up an appointment with me. My appointments are default via Zoom, but if you happen to be in DC and are visiting campus and would like to meet in person, I'm happy to do that. I will also answer questions by email. And I would just like to note that as we expand Georgetown's campus, that we are located on what's called the Hilltop campus rather than the Capitol campus.
We also welcome if you'd like to come off mute and ask a question as well. Now would be a great time for that. The one that you're wondering if you should ask is definitely the one you should ask.
Hi, I'll ask a question. My name's Harper Davis. Applying for the advocacy and policy concentration, and I just had a question about the content of the academic statement of purpose. I noticed while reviewing the application prompt that it mentions specific potential research interests. Is there anything else that you recommend specifically for the A&P concentration to include in the academic statement of purpose? And thank you again for all the info tonight.
So one thing I always recommend that people include in their statement of purpose, and this is not necessarily specific to advocacy and policy, but it's a good rule of thumb for applying to graduate school in general, is why us? What about our program speaks to you? What about our program do you think is going to help you fulfill the goals you have within education, right? So why is it our program you're interested in rather than graduate school in general?
Thank you.
And then I'll let if Professor Jung or Professor Wesley Nero have anything to add.
No, and I think that's exactly why specifically us. I will say it's not the strongest application to feel like we're one of 12 programs that you're applying to, and everyone is a generic reply. So that's the best tip for no matter what you're pursuing.
Yeah, and like to put what I said another way is what sets you on fire about our program, right? What about our program do you see and go, yes, that matches what I'm thinking and what I want with not only my own graduate education, but what I want to do with education in the US. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. I noted this in the chat, but I'll say it out loud as well. Anyone who RSVP'd to this session will receive the recording, whether you were here or not. So please look forward to getting that email from me, likely on Monday, because as we've all learned, it takes Zoom sometimes a little bit to get their recordings really uploaded. So, and again, if you have any other questions that are particular to you, questions that you just forgot to ask, anything, please feel free to reach out.
Thanks for coming, everyone.